What brings you to learn,
Thank you.
learn and convene around systemic finance and ecosystems for transformation?
Yes. Can you put in the chat where you are coming in from today?
Awesome.
Here it
Right,
is.
everyone, I'm going to jump. Bye.
Okay, Caroline. Uh, the Global Mental Health Task Force. Great.
Great, great, great. Welcome, Parjat. We're all just checking in. Where are you from? How you're connected? Well, welcome, New Yorkers, especially today. And everyone else.
Oh,
We're
you
just
had the big election last night,
we had a big
Jen.
night. We had a big night.
Yeah.
I think I heard it was quite a concert.
But and yes, and an acceptance speech that went out with Bollywood themes.
So let's just introduce ourselves, Jen, as your co-hosts. I'm Steve Waddell in Boston, and I had the happy occasion to be at the founding meeting of Catalyst 2020, or Catalyst now in 2020. um, and I've been a founder really of Fest, I guess is one way to think of it. And all of this community's work, wonderful, the Fest community. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jen Vandermeer, and I've been on a number of Catalyzing Change Week calls this week and have seen similar things that happened here where we'll talk about the history, but I met Steve in a Catalyst working group 4 or 5 years ago. So I just really am pleased with all of this amazing work of this organization. And you'll get to know us more. I'm a professor at Parsons School of Design in New York City. I'm calling in today from Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is this incredible location that exists really for all of the different reasons of systemic transformation. We won't go in today. And we're so pleased to also have two people who represent ecosystems, Catalina Escobar and Giacomo Panafo, who've joined us to share as well exactly what we're all talking about when we talk about finance ecosystems for systemic transformation. So welcome, everybody.
So I've worked in the field of transformation for over 40 years, the local to global level, and a lot of that's been in finance, as it turned out. It wasn't my plan. But that's how I got into this whole arena. But let's then go quickly to our, if people can, new people can continue to share where they're from and where they are today, that would be wonderful. So we get a feeling who's here. Um, so just to give you a sense of our day today, this is the welcome we've been giving for myself and Jen. We'll give you a little intro to Fest. The case we will have with Giacomo is in Messina in Italy. And we'll have the case from Colombia with Catalina. So nice, wonderful global perspectives here. And then after we've looked at the cases, we'll look at them through the lens of what we've found people are developing as what we call an ecosystem for financing systemic transformation, which we think is really where people are going who are really working on financing transformation. You hear a lot about funds or different ways of approaching it, but we found that people are actually real entrepreneurs, like the represented by the two cases here, very entrepreneurial. So I think you'll relate with them well. So just to jump into some description about Fest. 2020, meeting in the UK to start Catalyst. Well, at that time it was Catalyst now 2030. And it was obvious that financing is a major issue for social entrepreneurs who are working on systemic change in particular. We thought of this, we've developed the concept of this being a field of financing that is developing. And our role as a community is to support the acceleration of its development. And we do that in a variety of ways that Jen will talk to you more about. Importantly for us, we are founded with a new paradigm response to this concept of financing. One is particularly about being systemic. That is thinking about systems and how to develop systems, because we see systems is a critical way to approach systems change. And that's certainly foundational for Catalyst now. And I'm sure a lot of you, like I've appreciated the metabolic work that has been so systemic as well. So that means that we don't talk about things like root causes, which is quite a non-systemic concept, right? It's about tight knots of interacting causes that produce the outcomes. So it's something different than a silver bullet approach, or the root cause where you can pull out the weed and everything's good. So understanding transformation in finance. So fundamental to that is understanding that there's this intense period of experimentation about how to do the financing. The cases we have here and the ones we've been looking at have been involved in this intense experimentation. We're now moving to a stage where we think there's enough experimentation. We've got to continue to experiment, but there's enough experimentation that we can move on to a new stage of development, which involves putting in the infrastructure, the relationships, the policy, the new types of organizations necessary to really boost this type of approach to financing systemic change. And then the third stage in developing transformation is once we've got that type of experimentation and the infrastructure, the systemic infrastructure, we can really develop then the the approach much more broadly. And we think that values, principles, and power are key issues in the transformation as we're thinking of it. So that's the foundation of FEST. I'll now turn it over to Jen to have her further explain what we're doing. So my role is as founder. Jen is taking on the role now as lead steward for the community. So over to you, Jen.
Yeah, just to further explain how we all came together, it was very much a catalyst moment of catalyzing. Steve has a background in really well known in the communities of systems change and transformation. I come from a finance and entrepreneurship background, and I think by the time Catalyst arose, was in a very frustrated place with social entrepreneurship, always trying to go after a problem, solution, but then hitting our heads against a wall, for many years. So this very much is a chance for us to come together and question the field of finance and how it supports transformation. Together we worked through why are we all here. We come from finance backgrounds, systems change backgrounds, philanthropy backgrounds. We all think part of the problem is we all operate in our silos. And so this is a collective learning community, working together to advance the field. Sorry, go ahead with our theory of change. This was collective work we all did to say, what does the field need? Those familiar with the Horizons framework of Sharp, H1, H2, H3. Many transformation organizations live in a future state, a utopic state, a beautiful dream. We all have been there. We've all been participants in that, and we continue in many of our multiple selves live in those worlds. FEST, we all determined, was to center on H2, the bridge from the world we're in now to the world we want to see, and what are the core essential activities, contributions we need to collectively make. And that includes activating a knowledge and research system that has since spun off of FEST and is, with leading scholars from MIT in Utrecht, Jason Jay and Johan Schott, organizing a development of the field from a research discipline perspective, and also doing some research on what we call emerging prototypes. And you'll meet two of those today who are quite established actually in this work. In addition to doing work around aligning finance with the values that we collectively share, the tools that we need, the narratives that we hope to take shape. And something I've learned about coming from a finance background, which I knew less about, but now have a clearer understanding, is the mapping and enabling environments that we need. Why is it that we keep seeing social entrepreneurs begin in regions of the world that have a different enabling environment than Silicon Valley and struggling to achieve liftoff? Why do we see things in Silicon Valley transplanted around the world and kind of being extractivist in their data structures? This all has to do with enabling environment. But we'll bring it over to like, what is it that we're talking about to really learn from those prototypes. So we've done quite a bit of work to learn from these communities, to spin off this knowledge and research work. And now we're engaged in three primary areas. This is all volunteer work, but doing field mapping, convening, and now we're about to do an initiative around investor engagement that may become the finance model, the business model of VEST itself.
Thank you, Jen. So we'll turn it over to Giacomo. Just a minute, Giacomo. And Abby, can you give Giacomo privileges for his co-host so he can present?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, here I am. Perfect. So I've shared the screen now. Thanks. Thanks, Jan and Steve, for the invitation. And I've tried to squeeze my presentation here in about 10 minutes. I'm not going to go through all the slides, but let's see if I'm able to explain a bit how we work. So I'm Giacomo Pinafo, Secretary General of the Messina Community Foundation. Quick introduction of the context. We're based in Sicily, at the core of the Mediterranean, which is a real hotspot of climate change. Indeed, 70% of our territory here in Sicily is at risk of desertification. And in addition to this, Sicily is also listed among the less developed regions in the EU, according to the cohesion policy, due to the socioeconomic conditions of the region. Very high unemployment, one of the highest rates of unemployment in Europe, actually, high rate of poverty, and so on. So these make the territory, the Sicilian region, a territorial laboratory to test policies addressing climate change and social inequalities and vulnerabilities. Now, in this specific context, the Messina Foundation was created back in 2010, and it's a non-for-profit community foundation, and it traces its origins actually back in the 90s after the so-called Sicilian Spring, which was the civic movement that developed here in Sicily against the mafia. And it was promoted by a group of highly diversified social economy organizations in order to promote social justice and sustainable economic and human development, focusing on the design and implementation of socioeconomic policies, of new socioeconomic policies in the target territories in Sicily. Its approach is grounded in the capability approach of Professor Amartya Sen and in complexity theory. So we work basically trying to create inclusive socioeconomic ecosystems in our target communities in order to generate new opportunities for everyone with respect to the different dimensions of life: work, housing, society, knowledge, and so on. Breaking the silos between the different, let's say, sectors and dimensions. because we believe that the ecosystemic approach is indeed fundamental to properly address the complexity and multidimensionality of poverty and inequality in our context and across the world, I would say. So through this approach, basically, we lead nowadays a wide social economy cluster made of foundations, social enterprises, associations, and so on, active in several fields. So in the social mediation and personalized social support services for disadvantaged people, in energy projects, so production and distribution of energy, in cultural production and events, educational activities for students, business incubation and consolidation, financial services as well. I have a slide specifically on this, technological research and innovation, and so on. Urban regeneration also from an infrastructural point of view. All the different organizations work in their fields and are, let's say, coordinated by the foundation, which is the coordinator and the entity design the policies which are implemented then in different target communities. Basically, what we do when we target a specific beneficiary, which can be an individual, a company, a community, first of all, we start with a participatory assessment process, which allows us to understand basically what are the main values, needs, and visions of our target beneficiary, and which then become fundamental to then design the policy that we will then implement. And then on the one side, the cluster aims to design and develop and implement new opportunities, generate new opportunities for the beneficiary in the different dimensions I was talking about. Then we also provide, when needed, empowerment capital, so which can take the form of grants, microfinance, equity, loans, depending on the specific needs and the specific beneficiary, in order for the beneficiary to properly implement the opportunities that are provided by the ecosystem. And third axis, let's say, we work on the individual and community social support services in order to facilitate vulnerable beneficiaries in understanding, giving value, and seizing the new opportunities provided, enabling them to exercise agency. Because our objective is not just to provide a one-size-fits-all solution, but to design opportunities which are tailored to the beneficiary and support the beneficiary in choosing, in making the choice, an informed choice about what is the best solution for him, her, in the context where they live. I'm not going to go through all the details of the example I had here. I'm just going to quickly through the main results. In the last 10 years, we have, let's say, provided support for over 1,000 vulnerable people, taking them out of poverty and marginalization, supporting more than 250 companies for 600 job places, always focusing on triple bottom line sustainability, so sustainable enterprises. Urban regeneration and requalification of about 10 architectural monumental sites that were abandoned and have been converted in common goods for the community. Technology transfer programs, cultural productions and internalization processes, engaging, let's say, the different communities where we work. Education services that have targeted several thousand students in the territories and so on. I will now focus quickly on the financial ecosystem. So we work by working with the territorial resources of the communities where we work, generating, co-generating, regenerating, and organizing the resources in different ways in order to allow the territory and the community to be self-generative as much as possible. And we have also set up a social financial system which can actually, let's say, act in order to attract financial resources and implement then the solution. We work through different, let's say, in different ways. First of all, we have our own direct grants that we disburse, let's say, to support the implementation of the actions. And we have also our own equity investment in social economy enterprises, which are directly engaged in the cluster. Our investments have leveraged additional private and public funding for the local communities, blending all the different sources, because we act channeling all the different, attracting and then channeling all the different resources from different sources to the community where it's needed. And when we don't find a proper financial instrument, we create our own financial instrument. So we have co-funded a microcredit institution, which has disbursed so far 1.4 million euros. And we have also developed and co-funded an asset management company, which is managing two impact investing funds, about 70 million euros totally, investing in equity of social economy enterprises. At the same time, we also offer other sorts of disbursements. So for instance, we have invested in a wide solar panel plant back in 2010, offering the energy produced by renewable energy for free to the families that have offered the roof for the installation of the plant, and that were also in this case disadvantaged family. So this allowed us basically to disburse them, let's say, the free electricity, and in this way we have generated relevant savings in terms of electricity cost, which is a sort of also disbursement, let's say. Very quickly, just an overview on the different communities where we work. We started in Messina on the top of Sicily, and then we expanded in other communities that asked for support. So here is one community, Fondo Sacca, which was a slum. You can see the pictures up on the right, and we worked on an area of the slum, converting and regenerating 2,500 meters of the slum, and allowing more than 200 households, so about 600 people, to gain access to decent housing through participatory processes. Also here on the top right, you see a site which is Capo Peloro. It was abandoned. It was basically a dump, an illegal dump, and it has been completely renovated, and it's the cultural center of all our activities. It now hosts our cultural festival and then a cultural research center, contemporary art museum that has been created and is being managed by the cluster. Forte Petrazza is our main headquarters, again an abandoned site that has been completely renovated and now hosts an open-air theater, astronomical observatory, immersive digital room, exhibition of contemporary art, all combined there, and has become a hub for local development. Mirabella in Bacari, a small center which has of 4,000 inhabitants. We received the main noble palace in the village and has been completely renovated and transformed into a common good, a common hub. In Roccavaldina, a small village of about 1,000 inhabitants, we regenerated instead here an abandoned industrial site, and which is now producing bioplastics from agri-food waste, generating new economic opportunities for the community. And then we are now working also in Novara Sicilia, 1,000 inhabitants, and Salina, the small island of Salina, where we are starting our regeneration activities again, starting from an infrastructure, from a site, a building, which are all being renovated and becoming hubs for then the development of wider policies for sustainable development of the communities. That's it. I stop here. Just want to say that we are now working on the creation of an international hub for inclusive and sustainable development to consolidate our experiences and to connect with other actors across the Mediterranean region, which is our main focus, but also across the world, let's say, knowing that we are not alone, that there are other partners like you doing similar stuff, and we are willing to expand therefore our connections with other partners around the globe. That's it.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Giacomo. Wonderful description of something that is truly socially embedded and has developed a financial system. We'll look at the financial system after we hear from Catalina, who has taken quite a different approach in Colombia. And that's one of the wonderful things about what we found is that they're very different approaches, which suggests there's a lot of different ways people can go about this type of financing of systemic transformation. Abby, if you can give Catalina co-host privileges, we'll turn it over to her and go to Medellin in Colombia. Thank you.
Perfect, Steve. Thank you so much. But I just realized that even though they are two super different cases, they are both developed in cities that have struggled with violence and with mafias. And in both, we have found ways of support and foster our communities coming out of those really difficult times. So I just realized that there's this very strong connection in our cases by listening to Giacomo.
Beautiful connection to make.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, wrong slide. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let me just be mindful of time. Okay. So I'm gonna present, yes, a super different case, except for what I just mentioned. So I'm gonna be presenting today Nodoka. Nodoka is an initiative created by Macaya. I'm gonna explain all of this to you, but first, let me explain to you what Macaya is. So Macaya is a nonprofit organization created here in Medellin, Colombia, and our purpose is to promote capacities for social development through cooperation, technology, and innovation. And our vision is a vision of society. So we envision a society where every person and organization has the information and knowledge to transform themselves and their communities. Macaya was created in 2006. I am one of the co-founders and was exactly created after Medellin, after like the really dark days and years and decades of Medellin, and the city was starting to become a hub for development and opportunities. We still had many issues, but the city was already sort of overcoming the worst times. Macaya was created through an active listening process. So it was really created by listening to the communities. This is a longer story, but when we created Macaya, we didn't intend to create Macaya. We thought that we were going to create something else, but by listening to the community, we ended up creating Macaya. And what the community told us during those days in 2006 is that the social sector needed support around technology, innovation, and international development and funding. So that's why and how we created Macaya. Almost 20 years after that, we're going to be 20 years next year. We develop projects almost in all Colombia, and through our platforms, organizations in 27 countries in Latin America access our services, which are mostly digital services for systemic transformation and for technology innovation. And I'm going to explain to you more about this, but just to give you an idea of our reach, in all those almost 20 years, we have benefited more than 100,000 people, almost 50,000 organizations with a social investment index of 0.6. Macaya has two key lines of work, one around technology for social change and one around resource mobilization and capacity building. In the technology for social change area, we work directly with communities that need digital skills. As you can suspect, in Colombia and in Latin America, many people are just accessing technology for the very first time, and we are there to support them with the digital skills. And we always see technology as a mean and not as an end. And our methodologies are developed exactly to fit that purpose. That means that our methodologies can be adapted for a coffee grower, for a teacher, for an entrepreneur, for a nonprofit, for anybody that wants to use technology for their transformation and for the transformation of their communities. And we teach from the super basic digital literacy skills to super advanced like coding and development skills to help people find jobs. So we are like in the full spectrum of technology. So we support digital skills programs, digital transformation. This is mostly for nonprofit organizations, but in the last years, we started working with micro and small businesses as well, supporting them in their digital transformation. And we have a for-profit venture that is a spin-off of Macaya, that is BTech, in which we offer programming related to building super advanced digital skills to help people access jobs in technology and also to support organizations to transform like their digital mindset. So that in the technology for social change area. And then we have the NOCA programming, which is everything related to building resource mobilization capacities. And this is sort of the piece of Macaya that we've worked with FEST and that we did a super in-depth analysis around this, a case study. I don't know if Steve and Jen are going to talk more about the case studies, but anyway, so we did a super in-depth study about this. So what is NOCA? NOCA was created in 2013 as a way to democratize the access to information around funding opportunities in the world. You know, think about more than 10 years back, how organizations were accessing information around funding opportunities, call for proposals, where funders are, and things like that. So we created this solution, again, listening to the needs of the social sector organizations here in Colombia around what they needed. So NODOCA is more like an ecosystem of solutions for resource mobilization and capacity building. So we have the platform, which is like what you can see here on the left part. We have learning, which was created after the platform, because people were telling us, yeah, thank you so much. We have a lot of information, but I don't know what to do with it, Yeah, I know that there's this grant opportunity, but I don't know how to create a project. I don't know how to access a funder. I don't know how to monitor and evaluate my projects. So we created sort of a whole learning practice tied to this same umbrella organization. The funds, this one is in a different color because it's like in an H2 horizon, because in the future we want to create our own fund, because we think that there's a need in a point in the development and funding ecosystem where we can add value with our own fund. And we also are like an ecosystem developer because we are supporting organizations to be more efficient, more effective, to scale their operations so they can access funding and better opportunities. So this actually, Steve and Jen, this is something that came out in the study. So it helps you understand a little bit where we sit in the ecosystem. So NOCA is like a portion of Macaya, but Macaya does many other things. And Macaya sits in between like funders, international agencies. We have a very strong connection with the local social sector organizations. So we are super connected to different parts of the ecosystem, and that also allows us to serve this broken role, deal aggregator, to also offer advisory services to other nonprofits, to create tools and different services for the organizations that are trying to level up their capacities to access better funds but also to be more sustainable, to drive better impact, to monitor that impact, and to make sure that as a collective, we drive our communities out of poverty. And this has become super important this year, where the funding ecosystem, a lot of pressure has been put to the funding ecosystem, as you all know, starting in January with the USAID, with the closing of USAID and other agencies actually decreasing their funding. We believe there's an opportunity there to develop more local funding ecosystems, to develop a system that is less driven by power, and to have more local voices around how funding should work in the world. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit more what we do in each of the pillars. So in terms of the information, the platform itself is a platform. You can access it here in nodoka.co. I can put the link in the chat. So organizations can access, as of today, 300 active funding opportunities. We have information of more than 3,000 funders. We have information of more than 7,000 local organizations. Jen and Steve, this section is new. We have training courses now. So organizations can access 102 lectures. They are micro lessons, of course, because people don't want to take now like a 4 or 5 hour training class. So these are micro lessons around capacity building, for resource mobilization, for building projects, for doing networking, and everything that is related to building better funding and resource mobilization capacities for organizations. And we have around 60 pieces of content that is very practical and driven around learning. Because again, and we always talk about this in the team here, information about opportunities and funding and calls, you can do that in ChatGPT nowadays. But we add value in teaching organizations how to access this information in a productive way, how to contact the right organizations, how to level the power structures in the funding ecosystem, how to monitor their projects, and things like that. And that's why we do a lot of training and capacity building. So we do face-to-face training, virtual training, blended training, open training, closed training sessions. We do a little bit of everything, because at the end, what we want is to increase the level of knowledge that local social sector organizations and social entrepreneurs have around the funding ecosystem. You may be thinking about the business model, and sometimes the organizations pay directly for their training. We try to do them super cost efficient so they can be accessible for them, but sometimes someone else pays for them, like the local mayorship or a funder. And this is a model that is relatively common here in Colombia. We have a capacity assessment for resource mobilization, because we also want to let organizations where they are, in their maturity level, because not all funds are for all organizations. And we believe organizations need to understand where they are to access the right resources, the right funders, and to be aligned with the processes and with the people and with the talent that they have. So this is a new service that we implemented this year. We had it, but we had it like super in an offline mode, and now it's more, it has more technology. We also have personalized advisory services for organizations that need more like a one-to-one support, opportunity identification and management. So, for example, in the opportunity identification, we support organizations identifying their funding ecosystem, and we teach them how to access that funding ecosystem. Again, all our methodologies are built on capacity building. So I always say that, for example, when an organization comes to us and tells us, "Thank you, but I don't need you anymore," that is a success for us, because then we can focus our energies in other organizations that needs to increase their knowledge about all these topics. So we always take this approach under that capacity building strategy. And these are just some of the pictures of our work, and that's it. I think that, yeah, a little bit over the 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Bravo. Thank you so much. So let's take a look at these two different cases from the point of view of ecosystems for financing systemic transformation. How do we make sense of what they're doing financially here? So it's useful to start with the conventional thinking of how we get money. So somebody's got money, we call this a capital allocator. Somebody's got a project, that's a social entrepreneur. And that's the way the money is exchanged around a project. What these cases and others that we've been looking at are doing is something much more complex. Of course, that's a part of it, but it's much more complex. So what we find is that people are actually putting together money from diverse sources. So you could hear Giacomo talk about how they had private and public and philanthropic funding going in. They blend that capital, they aggregate it, and then they have their own capital aggregator function. And they started with local projects. Both of them started with the local projects, and then understanding that the projects needed some type of connecting to be able to give them the scale and the capacity to be able to do this type of financing. And then we have this emergence of a new type of governance system for the financing piece. So a critical element here is the consideration of a system steward. Both of them have roles in the cases we've had for putting together this type of system. But they've developed that through their practice of doing things that are very grounded. So if we look at the way they started, we can see that Giacomo with the Messina Foundation very much started with, they've got over 250 organizations that have been brought into the cluster in Messina with local projects saying this is what we should be doing. And then they developed this concept of some sort of collective local projects connector. And they developed into particularly developing their capacity to raise money as a broker. And then they grew into, when they were raising money from diverse sources, they ended up becoming actually a capital allocator with their microcredit fund, their new bank, their asset management company, etc., that is all doing that. The story that Catalina told was quite different, right? She started around, the capacity development question. And from the capacity development, she developed this community with local partners in the green up here and started to understand their needs differently. And through that, they ended up developing the NDOCA as some sort of a broker function with local projects to be able to connect the sources of the funding, those who have capital, with the needs of the local community, all the while keeping the capacity development as front and center. So these local project partners are creating tools. The tools are the organizations, the tools are the relationships, the platforms, etc., to be able to provide the connection. And of course, they have assessment, which is part of measurement, just understanding it, whether they're successful or not, and creating feedback loops. So what we find is that they've actually created something much more complex than simply a fund or a single organization or project. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Jen because we've developed some out of this. We've just wrapping up 5 years of wrapping up. I mean, we've created 5 years of understanding about what is happening. So we've also learned some lessons, and Jen's going to share information about those lessons.
Yay. Okay, so as you can see, this is, this is not your standard philanthropic only or funder approach. What we see in all of these examples is this local, adaptive, centering community values. And so, but at some point along the way, Catalina and Giacomo took a financial ecosystem approach. They knew they had to not just change, the project or the funders, but take on the responsibility of building and stewarding these ecosystems. Keep going.
Sorry.
And developing as system stewards. So it's a very different role and approach, not just program or project lead, but taking on again this whole systems view and the commitment to steward this transformation, not as a top-down exercise, but as a complexity, emergent capability and capacity of everybody involved. You can see in all of these examples, power is addressed. The values that these ecosystems center are the values of community. And these are 10-minute glimpses for what was years of work of trust building and strong relational ties and developing principles that work for the community and continue to evolve. Starting points are numerous. Not everybody starts in the same place, but very often, folks are starting with a very kind of core local need that needs to be addressed, but building a large ambition that combines over time. As you can see, these ecosystems get themselves complex as they try to address these deeply unmet needs in these communities. And everywhere we looked, triple loop learning is there. It's not just this quick monitoring, evaluation, fill the dots, check the box. It's deeply understanding what is it that we want to learn and sense make together, and going back to the core design of any instrument, any social enterprise, any activity, any mechanism involved to say, how is it really changing the stakes? And my learning in this process is, what does exactly transformation mean? How do you know when it's transformation when you see it? And what we're seeing here in all of these cases within FEST is we're contributing to a new social contract, stopping the control, monitoring, evaluation, funder in charge, funder in control, to something very different, where we can see trust as something that really is the main activity of all of this incredible human contribution. Okay.
Bravo. So we might get some comments or questions from you. If you have any, please raise your hand or put the questions in the chat box. And I'm just wondering, to go back to Catalina and Giacomo, how this concept fits for you, that now that this is what's emerged from talking with you and others. Do you feel it makes sense for you, or it's a useful way to describe it? Or what insights might you have gathered through working with us as a community too? Does one of you want to go first? We've got Gertis too, who has a question. Thank you. Catalina, you were nodding.
Yeah, I can go super quick because I want to listen to the two questions that are out there. To me, being part of the FEST movement and community, it was like a lighthouse for us, because we were doing things in a empirical way, but like this, when it was analyzed under the FEST lens, many things made sense, and we could identify ourselves with many other things that were happening in the world. And by putting names to many of the things that we were doing, that's why I say it's like a lighthouse, because it sort of sheds some light also in the things that we could be doing differently, because that can happen, but also in the things that we could do in the future. So to us, it was finding a community of peers where we could understand each other and we can also learn a lot about ourselves.
Yeah, I would. Thanks, Catalina, for the introduction, because indeed I agree on this. Above all, on the last point, for us, given that we are very strongly focused on our context, because we are locally based, let's say, organization focused on a specific area, our fear was to be too focused on our business, say, and we were missing an external analysis. We have some international corporations, EU projects, and so on, sure, but still, the fast analysis has been essential for us to have an external view on what we do, on our activity, also our theory, and create new connections, which are essential, I believe, for our experiences across the world, because I know that there are many other actors doing similar things. I've seen now what Catalina is doing in her area of the world, let's say, and I believe that there are many others doing similar stuff, but we still miss, let's say, connections between us, I would say.
Thank you so much. Gertis.
Yes,
Welcome.
thanks, Steve. And yeah, I'm calling in from Metabolic, and just I would already want to second that thought, Giacomo, that there are so many initiatives that I think are happening at the same time that would be so great to learn from. Because what I wanted to also say is we're doing also this bioregional transition in North Carolina currently. And what is great about the FEST network as well, the approach, is it's also just sometimes very practical. I mean, sometimes you just need a different legal vehicle, right? And then to have that in the system and know you can also actually use that actor to fulfill that legal, practical role is also really great. But one question that I have, and this is potentially a very basic question, but how do you approach, the whole synergy effect with all these different projects that you're investing in? Specifically, Giacomo, it was great you showing all these different initiatives across the whole of Sicily, but is the synergy effect something that's prioritizing for you, or you focus on like one by one and then kind of see what happens? What is your thinking in this?
What we have seen, thanks for the question. What we have seen is that biodiversity of the ecosystem is essential, meaning that it makes the whole ecosystem more resilient. The more diverse is our cluster, the more resilient, let's say, in the long term. Because even if one piece fails, let's say, the ecosystem will anyway be able to redistribute the actions, the activity, the tasks, and keep the equilibrium. While if we concentrate everything in one single, let's say, entity, for instance, organization, it would be much more riskier. And this means that also expanding synergies, exploring synergies is essential, because it allows us to expand the cluster, expand the actions, explore new words, let's say, which with too strict focus, we would risk to lose, let's say, that kind of open view. And just to give you a concrete example, I was talking about the example of Roccavaldina, where we have regenerated an abandoned industrial area, and because that's what they had. They had an abandoned industrial area, and they wanted to do something with it, but we didn't know what to do with it. On the other side, in Messina downtown, we supported a workers' buyout operation of a brewery, of an historical brewery. So we created a cooperative of workers which recreated the brewery. And thanks to a visit by a professor of the University of Venice, that again we brought there for a visit, they said, look, you're producing a lot of beer and you're producing a lot of beer spent grade, which is a waste, a byproduct of the beer production. What are you doing with this waste? And nothing, it's a waste. Well, why don't you work to produce bioplastic? And we said, okay, wait, we have an abandoned industrial site over there that we could use for this. Let's create a European project, 3 million euros, and we launched this production, connecting these synergies that were absolutely not planned.
Thank you so much. Rosalinda.
Yeah, thank you. This has been lovely to hear these specific cases. My question here, I actually think it might be interesting to answer through the specific cases, and I think you, in some ways, were just doing that, Giacomo, because I think the ecosystem, these like synergies, are exactly the thing that answers what I'm going to point to. But I just think it's interesting to make explicit. And so my question is, in the traditional model that Steve outlaid, you've got projects and they need funding, and so they apply to grants. And grants are scarce and everyone's fighting over them. And then also you have a lot of overhead. You're paying a lot of like admin staff to be applying to grants all the time. But when you shift to this broad ecosystem, you have a lot more actors, a lot more people to interact with, and that's its own type of overhead. And so I guess my question is, in shifting that relationship, how do you deal with that? Maybe not increase in overhead, but shift in it. Yeah.
For me, again, I guess in the well, let's see if I'm able to answer. The fact is that what we have seen is most of the times funders, there are a lot of funders are divided into silos. They have their own silos. Each funder often has its own theory of change, its own sector focus, and so on. And they don't talk to each other. And so it's hard to launch an ecosystemic project with just one funder. Because again, when you talk with a funder and you explain the whole ecosystemic policy that you are implementing, they get scared. They don't understand it, they get confused, and they don't want to find it. So what we do is often we design the policy and we then create a financial framework by splitting the policy, let's say the overarching and complex policies, in projects which are more understandable for the funders. And then we give, let's say, we talk with one funder explaining only that piece, let's say, of the cake, so that project. Then another funder, another piece, another funder, another piece. And they don't talk to each other, they don't need to talk to each other, and they are not aware of the fact that they are funding a complex policy. But we don't care, because we are designing and implementing the policy with the community. So in the end, sure, it's hard to handle at the same time all those funders. So we have a cost, let's say, for the management of this, but it gives us a higher leverage capacity to combine all the different sources and therefore being able to actually implement a more structured policy. I don't know if this...
Thank you so much. Catalina.
Yeah, super quick because I know we're running out of time. I think, Rosalind, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but we're trying to move, and I think this is aligned with Jen's comment. We're moving away from being a project and program-based organization. We used to be like that, to be an organization that has different streams of income, including income that comes from our own product and services, because those income that we have from our own product and services are more flexible funding, and it's funding that we can do as a that we can put as a cost share in other programs. And I didn't talk about this a lot, but with this spin-off that we created as a for-profit organization, Macaya is the main shareholder of that organization. So in the future, we also hope that funding from Macaya comes from market-driven economies, but all with a social purpose.
Thank you so much. And that's very interesting for Rosalind, I know, because Rosalind's very interested in next economies. And so that's part of developing the whole next economies approach. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of Catalyst Now week. And thank you for all of your efforts. I'm sure you're all busy as entrepreneurs yourself. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks again, Giacomo and Catalina.
Thank you, Jen, for putting this together. Giacomo, very nice to see you and to meet you here.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you,
The same.
everyone, for
Bye
sharing
bye.
your wisdom and the work you do. Thank you. Bye.